My notes tell me to say hello. Thanks. Software studies as. Software studies as a metaphorical pursuit, or perhaps a pursuit of metaphors. I'll talk about 3 workshops I've attended that fit this particular model. First was at Intel Research Berkeley, and it was Street Talk, Urban Computing. And what I felt that particular field needed at the moment was a secular saint, so I proposed Jane Jacobs, whose fine-grained mixtures of street uses were her vision of what enlivened any great city. And what I tried to bring to everyone's attention was her own attention to detailed observation, bottom-up rather than top-down modeling, and attacks on monocultures of all kinds. Then there was a UCLA NSF workshop called Design for Forgetting and Exclusion. And I ran across a line that I really liked by the British critic Jonathan James. Memory cherished too long with too much bitterness makes a stone of the heart. And the whole point was to think about how, if forgetting is integral to the human mode of producing meaning and of memory itself, what were we going to do if all we did was build systems that were holding on to material? This particular image is the Bruce Lee statue in Mostar, Bosnia, former Yugoslavia. It's a statue for universal peace because, quote, "We will always be Muslims, Serbs, or Croat," said Veselin Galato, "but the one thing we all have in common is Bruce Lee." And I mean, that gives me hope and makes me weep. At UC, HRI, Intel, and the UCI Anthropology Department did a workshop on the workaround as social relation. And I really liked this idea for a workshop because the workaround from engineering, from software, is not so much about solving a problem as evading it, going around it, and potentially coming back to it later. The images here are from Jane Fulton Surrey's book with IDEO called Thoughtless Acts. Each one of these things is a workaround. You need to hold your hair up. You use a pencil. You hold your door open in those ways. But if we're going to be using these metaphors, and we've had a lot of them discussed already today, I think that software studies as an historical imperative must enter into things. And so with my forthcoming book, The Secret War Between Downloading and Uploading, I've actually got a subtitle called How the Computer Became Our Culture Machine. And I just told Doug today that the following chapter is going to be open sourced, and he said it was okay. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to offer a concise history of the computer as a culture machine. So talking about 2 intertwining memes, simulation and participation through 6 generations of computing. And here they are. The first generation would be the patriarchs, those idiosyncratic visionary bureaucrat scientists, J.C.R. Licklider and Vannevar Bush, who established the founding memes in the early years of World War II through the early 1960s. Then we have 2 men named Watson, the plutocrats, Thomas Watson Sr. and Thomas Watson Jr. Aren't you glad he's not your dad? They make a business out of computing, centralizing the operations into top-down bureaucracies during the 50s and 60s. They, of course, are followed by the group I call the Aquarians, Douglas Engelbart and Alan Kay. They react to that button-down all-business attitude, expand on the patriarch's more open-ended ideas, and develop the paradigm of visual, personalized, networked computing. In the 1980s and the 1990s, the hustlers, that's Microsoft's Bill Gates, that's a real photograph, and Apple's Steve Jobs, commodify this personalized vision, putting a distinctive new economy stamp on computing. By the mid-90s, that is not a real picture of Linus Torvalds. Building on the installed base of all these users in the as the new millennium loomed, the hosts Tim Berners-Lee, and of course, open source guru Linus Torvalds, link all of these disparate personal machines into a huge web, concentrating on communication as much as technology, pushing participation to the next level. And then now we are in that sixth generation, the searchers, named after but hardly limited to Google, the search algorithm that became a company and then a verb, in which we've seen Larry and Sergey aggregate so much information and so many experiences that they render simulation and participation ubiquitous. Which leads me to the next part of what I'm going to be talking about, which is software studies as part of the emerging digital humanities. Kathy Davidson, who many of you know, of Duke and Haystack, is calling for the humanities to follow science into the realm of the big science. She notes that the Sloan Digital Sky Survey, which is the most ambitious astronomical survey ever undertaken, uses 40 terabytes of data, and contrast that with the survivors of the Shoah Visual History Project, which requires 200 terabytes of compressed data. So her call is basically for the humanities to go big. But software studies might actually remind us that there's still a lot that can be done with the small, little digital humanities. The media work project that I did with MIT Press was all done on laptop machines, was all done distributed. It didn't require vast amounts of computing, but it's certainly a part of what software studies should be at least interested in. And then finally, I'd like to close with software studies as counter-programming. We've already had a bit of discussion about, for example, the cognitive turn. And I'm interested in how contemporary discourse is starting to embrace things that I'm not certain need to be embraced. I think that we are simply in a rush to replace psychoanalysis with cognitive science as the universal explanatory tool. And you just sort of move down that way and, replace Freud's cigar with Steven Pinker's hair. Replace psychoanalysis with neuroscience, replace, the diagram of the ego, the id, and the superego with brain mapping. By the way, I really hate brain mapping. And one of the things I'd like, and the brain mapping I hate the most is by Andrew Nuremberg from UPenn, who offers scans of meditating monks and nuns and performs self-evidentiary analysis that God exists. I would certainly hope that software studies has at least a little spot in its heart for atheism. And then finally, or at least an atheistic impulse, finally, one of the things I'm most concerned with is obviously the secret war between downloading and uploading, or I wouldn't have called the book that. And I think that the market is out there and it's pushing the machines that we use and that we are talking about to become precisely this, a mobile, ubiquitous mix of shopping wand and television. And if you want to be a patio potato, you are free to become that, as AOL insists you should be. But I'm pretty certain that patio potatoes are what the electric sheep that Philip K. Dick dreamed of eat. So watch out. Thank you.